To start the ribbing, first thing we do is make a slip knot. Now in the instructions, you can do the first row of the ribbing in one of two ways. You can either chain 10 and then work single crochets across the row. I like to do a foundation single crochet because it gives me a nice even edge to work along, and I don't have to worry about working into those chains. So I'm going to show you in this video how to do a foundation single crochet so that if you'd like to use that, you can. So we start off by chaining 2. Then I'm going to insert my hook in the first chain that I made here, draw up a loop. Now normally I would finish my single crochet here, but instead I'm going to yarn over and pull through just one loop, and that right there forms the foundation chain that you would normally have made and worked into. Then I yarn over and finish the stitch. So that's the first one. To make all of the rest of them, I insert my hook under both loops at the bottom of that stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through one loop, yarn over, pull through both loops. Now I have 2. So I'm going to make 9 of these across the row. Insert my hook underneath that loop at the bottom of the stitch I just made, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through one loop, yarn over, pull through 2. And I'm going to do that across the row. All right, I have 9 single crochets, and that's going to be the first row of my ribbing. For row 2 and each row until we end the ribbing, I'm going to chain 1, and in that same stitch, back loop only, single crochet. And I'm going to do that in the back loop across the row. All right, I have row 2 finished. Again, like I said, every row after row 1 is a repeat of row 2. So I chained 1, and I'm going to work in the back loop only across the row. So at this point, simply repeat row 2 until you've reached or completed the number of rows that you need for the ribbing for your size. That information will be in the pattern. When you have all of those rows finished, meet me back here and we'll talk about how to sew the seam. I've finished the ribbing, and now it's time to sew the seam for the ribbing. Make sure that you check the size that you're making for the number of rows of ribbing that you need, because that will determine the number of stitches you have in the first round of the body of the hat. All right, so this is the last row of the ribbing that I made, and I'm going to show you how to make this seam without having to cut any threads. Last row, I'm going to take the first row, which is here, and place it on top of the last row. All right, and then I'm going to turn that over so that I'm working from right to left. First thing I'm going to do is chain 1. And then I'm going to work through the back loop of the row that I just worked and the front loop of the foundation single crochet that I worked to start. If you did chains to begin, then you're going to be working through the one loop of the chain that's left. So the slip stitch seam, insert here and insert here. And that is our first slip stitch of the row. second slip stitch is just the same thing in the next stitches. And I'm going to do that across in all 9 stitches. Okay, so I've worked my seam across. It looks like this. Once I've done that, I want to turn that to the inside and work on the right side of the fabric. So you'll to start round 1 of the body, I'm going to chain 1 and half double crochet in the end of each row around. Now make sure that you follow a pattern around. Sometimes it can be a little bit difficult to see where you are, but you want to make sure that you have exactly the same number of stitches around that you made rows of ribbing. All right, so I'm going to try to find my first stitch here. Sometimes it can be a little tricky. We're going to half double crochet in the end of that first row of ribbing, half double crochet in the end of the next row, and again, to prevent holes, work through the last stitch of the row, which can be a little bit difficult, but you can do it, so that you end up with a stable edge and not create a bunch of holes. So you can see that it's kind of blending into the end of the rows. I'm going to keep working half double crochets in the end of each row until I get back to the beginning, and I'll show you how to invisible join. All right, I've reached the end of round 1 of the body of the hat, and I'm going to invisible join because the next round I'm going to be working in the 3rd loop, and this way I can hide the join. All right, so this right here is the first stitch of the round, and I have my last stitch of the round here. So I'm going to take my hook out of the loop, insert my hook from back to front through the loops, under the loops of the first stitch of the round, like so. I'm going to put that loop back on the hook and pull it to the back of the work. Adjust it so that the join is hidden, like so. So this loop is right next to this loop. So round 2, we're going to be working in the 3rd loop. This is half double crochet in the 3rd loop. I have the right side of the fabric, the right side of the stitches are facing me. That means the 3rd loop is going to be on the back side of the stitches. So looking down the line here, it's easier to see. This is the top loop, and right behind it is the 3rd loop right there. The first one is always a little bit trickier, but we're going to make it work. So we chain 1 to start. This is the first stitch, half double crochet, but I'm going to half double crochet into the 3rd loop that is behind it, which is right here. Then half double crochet in the 3rd loop of the next stitch. Let me slow that down for you now that we're over here. So again, here's the top loop. Right behind that, right here, is the 3rd loop. So that's where I'm going to insert my hook after I do a yarn over. So yarn over, not the top loop, but right behind it, underneath it, is the 3rd loop. And I'm going to work half double crochet in that 3rd loop all the way around. I end round 2 with another invisible join, which I will show you when we get there, because round 3, we're going to be working that half double crochet in the 3rd loop one more time. So I'm going to work around and meet you at the end of round 2. I've reached the end of round 2, so now we're going to do an invisible join because we have another round of third loop stitches coming up. So this is my first stitch, so that's where I'm going to put my hook. So I'm going to take my hook out of the loop, put my hook through from back to front, put the loop back on, pull it through to the back, and then adjust it so that it's the right height, like so. Round 3 starts exactly the same way as round 2. So we're going to chain 1, half double crochet in that third loop, which is right here, and half double crochet in every loop around. All right, I'm going to finish round 3, meet you at the end. This time we have a regular slip stitch join, so it's no big deal, but I will meet you at the end of round 3. All right, I've reached the end of round 3, and all I have to do is slip stitch to join to that very first stitch as normal. I'm ready to start round 4, and to do that, I'm going to be making a granny stitch in this stitch where I joined. You can start your granny stitch any way you like. I prefer a stacked single crochet, but if you prefer to do a chain 2 or chain 3, by all means do so. So I'm going to show you how to start your granny stitch with a stacked single crochet. So I insert my hook, pull a loop through, and pull a loop through both of those loops. That's the bottom of the stacked single crochet. Next, I'm going to insert my hook in that left bar, pull a loop through, and then pull a loop through those 2 loops on the hook. So that's my stacked single crochet. In that very same space, I'm going to work 2 more double crochets. All right, so that is my first granny stitch. The stacked single crochet that I did counts as the first double crochet, then 2 more. To work the next one, I skip 2 stitches and work 3 double crochet in the next stitch. Skip 2 stitches, 1, 2, and work a granny stitch in the next stitch. And I'm going to do this all the way around. If you have the correct number of stitches, then it should work out that you skip 2 stitches at the end before you join. I'm going to finish round 4 and meet you at the end. At the end of round 4, I'm going to skip those last 2 stitches and just join to the top of the first stitch, whether that's the turning chain or the stacked single crochet. To start round 5, normally we would always work from right to left, but we're going to start in the space that's actually to the right of the hook here. And I'm going to work a stacked single crochet into that space. That's the last stitch of what's going to be at the first granny stitch. I'll explain it to you when we get there. But to do that, I'm going to go back, insert my hook in that space to the right of my hook, pull up a loop, pull through 2 loops, and then the second part of it is insert my hook in that left hand leg, pull a loop through, and pull through 2 loops. All right, so that's the stacked single crochet. I'm going to leave that for now and make my first, or actually my second granny stitch in this space between granny stitches in round 4. So my granny stitch, 3 double crochets in that space. The next one goes in the next space, so I'll work a granny stitch there. And I'm going to do that all the way around in every space. So what I'm going to do is finish my round 5, and I'll meet you back here to show you how to finish off round 5. I've finished the last full granny stitch of round 5, and I'm ready to finish up the round. And remember, we left that stacked single crochet hanging out by itself in that space. So we have to finish that first granny stitch. So I'm going to add 2 double crochets to that space in order to complete that granny stitch. Once I've done that, I'm going to join with a slip stitch to the top of that stacked single crochet to close up the round, and that finishes that first or last, whichever one you want to call it, granny stitch of round 5. To start round 6, I'm going to need to slip stitch into this space so I can start working my granny stitch. So I'll do that now. And I'm ready to start round 6. So to start round 6, again, if you've chosen to use a chain 2 or chain 3, do that right now, but I'm going to use a stacked single crochet. And then finish that first granny stitch with 2 more double crochets in the same space. Then I'm simply going to work a granny stitch in every space around for round 6. So this is the second granny stitch in the round. I'll finish that one. And I'm going to work round 6 all the way around, and I'll meet you back here when I'm finished. At the end of round 6, I simply join with a slip stitch to the beginning stitch, and that completes round 6. All right, from this point forward in the body, you're simply going to be repeating rounds 1 through 6 in that sequence. The pattern will tell you for the size that you've chosen where you need to stop. So complete the body of the hat and meet me back here, and I'll show you how to finish off the hat. When you've worked the final row of your hat, and be sure and check the pattern instructions because each size ends on a different round. I'm working the medium right now. But when you've reached the end of that final round, be sure that you join. You can join with an invisible join like I did. Any way you want to join is fine because this edge is going to be hidden. When you fasten off, make sure you leave a piece of yarn that's at least 12 inches long, if not longer, because you're going to use that to close the top of the hat. Okay, the first thing I'm going to do is turn my hat inside out so that I'm looking at the wrong side of the hat. And I'm going to work this close on the inside. All right, so here's the upper edge, here's my yarn. And all I'm going to do is work in and out of these stitches until I get around to the beginning. So there, we're just threading it in and out underneath both loops of the top. And occasionally along the end, you're going to want to just pull on the end of that yarn and start to gather the top edge of your hat so that you end up with enough yarn to finish this off. When I finally threaded the yarn through all of the stitches and I'm back at the beginning, I'm going to gather all of that together and make that closing hole that you can see here as small as possible. Now, because there's so much yarn that's being gathered up into this hole, and be careful not to break your yarn, you're going to have to do a little bit of extra to close that off. So that's about as close as I can get it because there's so much yarn being gathered in. So I'm going to take what I have left and I'm going to go across and gather again. You kind of have to find where that is. There. Take it across. We're just kind of going to go around and gather as much of that extra as we can and close up that hole. Just be careful not to get any yarn from the body of your hat or create a new hole like I just did. So make sure that you go through all of that there. And you can see that my hole is beginning to close up a little bit. All right. So once I've gone around one more time, gathering all of that up, I'm still going to have a little bit of a hole. So now I'm just going to go pull it as tight as I can, and it's getting pretty tight. So I think I might just go across, catch a couple of strands, come back across, catch a couple of strands, and do it one more time just to make sure I've caught everything. And check it out. It looks like it's pretty well closed. Now I'm going to check on the other side. So I'm going to turn it right side out just to check that the top of my hat is closed. Once I've discovered that it is, I will go back to the inside and very securely fasten that off. Once I have, I'm going to take the end of that yarn and I'm going to thread it back through and just weave in that end as securely as I possibly can. Once that's done, take my needle off. I can cut that thread there and I turn my hat back to the right side. And you can see now that the top of the hat is gathered and the hole is closed. And in the center of that hole, I'm going to sew on a pom-pom. All right, so these that I bought on Etsy have a loop. So on the inside of my hat, I would just choose some sort of button from my stash, sew it on the inside of the hat, and then thread that through and attach the pom-pom. And that is it.